All right. I'm Aryeh Schwartz, along with Rachel Galligan, and we are here for another installment of the Winsidr Film Room. We're here with defending WNBA champion Eric Thibault, one of the hottest names in the W in regard to coaching. Eric, thanks for joining us. How's it going?
Oh, thank you very much. It's very nice of you.
So, what have you been up to these days now that you're stuck in quarantine?
Well, I guess we should be a couple games into the season now, so that's a little frustrating, but just trying to stay connected with our players, I think like every team is, and trying to do some group workouts and projects just to keep everybody's mind in basketball, but mostly taking walks around the neighborhood and trying not to eat myself totally out of shape before we do get all back together at some point.
So talk to us a little bit. We obviously know about your dad. If people know your family, you got a coaching tree in your own family, not just a family tree. But kind of tell us a little bit about your coaching journey.
Yeah, I mean, obviously around my dad's teams from a young age, starting in Omaha and then Milwaukee before he took the job in Connecticut, which was kind of my introduction really to women's basketball, even though, he'd watched a little bit on TV here and there. And then my sister ended up being a good player, a lot better player than me. And she's now coaching with Lindsay Whalen at the University of Minnesota, which, obviously goes back to our Connecticut days. So it's kind of come full circle there. And I coached in college for a little bit and then had a chance to join my dad in DC and haven't looked back really 7 years and got over the hill this year a little bit finally with our group. So I don't know, we're all coaching, all doing our thing and we're all on hold right now like everybody else.
I'm curious, we often hear about families that have a lot of athletes and how they get competitive and play against each other. How, as you and your sister are coaches, did you guys find a way to coach against each other at a young age, or was?
Ooh. No, I don't think so. We battled out in the driveway, but she's a tough one. She's like you couldn't beat her too bad because she'd get mad, and you couldn't let her win because she'd get, she knew you were going easy on her. She's to this day remains difficult in that regard.
Shout out Carly.
Shout out to Carly.
So speaking a little bit more before we hop into this film, I'm curious about your bread and butter as a coach. What is your bread and butter? Some people see them more defensive-minded, offensive-minded, relationship. What's your bread and butter as a coach?
I would say my bread and butter is just trying to a lot of it's working with the guards, player development type of stuff. Trying to look at our players, individually and then collectively and see how can I make them better. Philosophically, offensive, defensive, that comes down more a little bit to maybe the personnel that we have on our team or what Coach T needs from me. I would say I have leaned over the years more towards the defensive side of things, but I think he's been really good about letting everybody kind of have, hands in every part of the game. But I would say more the player development side, individually with players.
Awesome. Well, we're going to do a little something different because you're our first coach on our film room. In the past, we've been breaking down people and elite athletes and their game tapes. But with this, we're going to look at the last 5 minutes of a game. And Rachel's going to bring it up right here. And this is the August 16th game. Minnesota Lynx taking on the Washington Mystics, obviously. Little bit of the stage setting here. It was tied at halftime. Lynx had a nice little lead going into the fourth. But as we're about to see, at a 2-point game with 5:23 left in the game, you guys really start to run away with it, scoring 30 total points in the fourth quarter. Rachel, take it away.
Yeah, as we're going through this, you guys, I think it's important, there's so many different ways to study film as coaches at all different levels. And the first 2 installments we had done, we really broke down specific actions, specific plays. Now it's just kind of going to sit down and analyze what's going on both ends of the floor and kind of letting this kind of free flow. I'll stop it at times. We're limited with the controls that I have here, but Coach, just go through it and kind of talk us through. I mean, obviously you guys were not down much, through the course of the regular season last year. And so you found yourself kind of in a unique situation here, down to 5 minutes to go. You're on the road. What's being talked about in this huddle?
I think probably just looking at who we're playing, probably making sure we knew where we were going to come off and help on Sylvia Fowles in the post for Minnesota. I mean, she, people look at our team and obviously we don't have a 6'6", hugely physical post player. So teams try to attack us that way as much as they can. A lot of times out of timeouts, Minnesota tries to get Syl a touch. So we knew probably something's coming right back, I think, to her to try to get her a post up in the lane.
Yeah, you can see him looking for her right there.
Yeah. Ariel Atkins knows she has Danielle Robinson, so she plays off a little bit more.
So, I mean, out of a timeout, you probably a stop. I mean, just getting a stop and finding some momentum on the offensive end. Are you guys the type of team that really builds on defensive stops?
I don't know what the numbers would tell you. I don't know if we try to build on stops as much as we can. A big key for us during the year was not fouling, not giving up threes, so that even if we get scored on, we can turn and run back the other way. And you can see both teams out of the timeout, they're going right to their, number one options.
Well, and this is an interesting possession because, Nafisa plays great defense, but you've got the greatest player in the world on your team, and this is just a phenomenal play by Elena.
Elena makes tough shots, and the other thing that jumps out right away, both teams playing with bigger lineups. We played the big lineup a lot, and then, Minnesota, I know, moving Nafisa back and forth to 3 and 4, but she's at 3 right here. So a lot of size on the court.
So there was a little bit of like a switch. Was that supposed to happen?
It looks like a little bit of an emergency switch to me. I think Ariel Atkins gets hung up a little bit trying to go through, but with our big lineup, we did switch a lot. I can't, to be honest with you, I can't remember if that was a design switch or we just switched on the fly. Emma and Elena and Latoya got really comfortable switching out. That's a nice give and go there.
I'm just very curious. Like, you have the greatest player in the world right now on your team. Obviously, you have a stacked lineup. How much of it is just get Deli the ball? Like run an offense through her versus, let Natasha kind of feel out what's working and what's not working?
I think that was a big area of growth for our team this year. In the past, it was, it takes a little bit of feel to go from we're going to flow versus we're going to still make sure Elena and Emma touch the ball. And you can get stuck trying to pound it every time, if the defense can really load up on Elena and they know what's coming every time. But I think we got a better conscience as a group after playing together a couple of years of just having a kind of a clock on our head, like, hey, she should probably touch it. It's been a couple times down. She hasn't touched the ball. And her knowing how she can just get to her spots and get to where she needs to get the ball. A good jump out switch there by Emma.
And that's what you guys do. Play fast, get the ball up and down the floor.
It is funny. It is funny to watch us get big stops down the stretch of games. Something that we hadn't been in that spot too much during the regular season, but it served us well come playoff time.
And that last possession, you have Miesemann stealing the ball from Odyssey Sims. That was unique. Aryeh, you pointed that out earlier as we were watching this. You're like, man, Miesemann's coming up with a big steal.
She's got such good hands defensively.
Does she?
Yeah.
Does that give you confidence as a coach to put her on smaller players that would have speed on her?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. She's really worked. I think her and Elena and Tiana Hawkins come to mind right away. They've really worked to be able to get out on the perimeter more and defend. I think a lot of it with bigs is a confidence thing that, they don't want to look bad. They don't want to get crossed over. So if you can get them over that mental hurdle, a lot of them find physically they can hang.
Mm-hmm. So you guys took the lead. You're up 2, less than 4 minutes to go. This seems like a little bit of just some broken action. I mean, just playing.
All that flowing can look a little ugly sometimes if you don't have a nice rhythm, but we just keep moving the ball, waiting for something to break down.
And I mean, you're going to have everybody try and cover your big stars, but having Latoya be able to hit those open shots, I mean, free throw line distance, Latoya is basically automatic. Yeah,
the last 2 years, I think when we had her a few years back, a lot of her jumpers were short. She really worked on getting the ball up over the front rim. As soon as it kind of clicked for her, man, she's taken off the last couple of years on offense.
So out of the timeout, you guys try to predict what teams are running? Do you pay attention to the tendencies of what they're running out of timeouts?
Yeah, you do. And then you try to think about what are your personnel they're going to go at. They tried to get the switch right there with Syl on Elena. But Latoya does such a good job. She's so active with her hands. I think she knocked away the entry pass.
When we were watching this film, I kept remarking, it just seems like on offense, the Lynx look flustered by the pressure. I mean, even just looking at the distance between the offense and defensive players, when you guys are on defense, you're up in your face, you're pushing tempo defensively. And on offense, you guys are controlling the pace again. I mean, it looks very very dominant, and it looks like the Lynx are kind of on their back heels, worrying too much on defense.
And yeah, and that could be just the part of the game that we're in. I know they jumped on us a little bit earlier, but I think that was what was so good about our team is we just knew that our run would come at some point. If we just kind of stuck to doing the right things, we got a couple stops, we got some runouts. All of a sudden, the half-court offense got a little easier. And I know they were trying to find a little bit of balance of offense and defense in their group. D-Rob's more of a defensive player for them, but trying to mix and match.
Walk us through some of this action here. It looks like you're setting kind of a double staggered high ball screen. And I think Miesemann might pin in for Deladon at the end of this. What are some of the options that can happen out of this action?
A little bit depends on how they play it. If they try to ice the ball down, we're probably going to have one big dive and one pop. But if Natasha Cloud can get over, I'm not sure if Latoya is going to come up and set a triple drag there. I'm not sure where I know she clears. Yeah, that little big pin. We ran that more this year. The double drag into the big pin. To try to make Minnesota have to switch on the fly, see if we can get them a little bit confused on whether they're trying to switch or stay with their man.
I mean, you've got Miesemann and Deladon up there. I would just be confused in general.
I think sometimes we take for granted that just because of who they are, they force tough decisions from the defense all the time. If you mess up a coverage that should look like an easy enough coverage, a switch or whatever. If you mess it up, it's 3 points or it's a bucket. You kind of miss that when you don't have it.
It's just such a scary lineup for the Lynx to be going up against your big lineup. I mean, they just don't have the personnel, in my opinion, to match you guys.
They might once Nafisa gets a little bit more time under the belt. They're gonna have a pretty good combo. The problem teams had going big with us was who are you going to have that's more skilled than Elena and Emma and big? I know teams had to debate whether they wanted to try to go quick and small or big and just try to be physical.
This one right here, I mean, this is just you're trying to dump it down to Elena on the elbow and ISO her.
Looks like a little ISO.
I mean, everyone's cleared out over here on the weak side.
We look a little jumbled up, to be honest. Again, it's just amazing. You watch the film back, Latoya makes so many little plays that I think go unnoticed sort of live, and she's not scoring 15 points a game.
But she's fighting down low with some of the biggest, most physical bigs in the league, and she's holding her own, which, I mean, she just doesn't get enough credit. I've been saying this for 2-3 years now.
Interesting little wrinkle out of that play for us. That's not usually. I don't know that we were intending to post Latoya on Sill out of the baseline out of bounds. They're trying to come back to this 2-man game.
That's a big shot. You're only up 1.
I know. I listened to Cheryl with you guys. She talked about Dantas having to take so many threes for them, and that's kind of the cat and mouse game we tried to play. We tried to help off of her on Sill's drive. Mm-hmm. Maybe a little more than we needed to at the top of the floor.
Nice to hear you listen. Thanks.
We appreciate you.
That's just a tough shot.
I mean, my God. I mean, what's it like coaching Atkins?
She's the most low maintenance player in terms of no ego, only ego about getting better.
Yeah.
And then she just has had this knack for 2 years of just making some plays. That's off balance. She made a shot in our Atlanta series 2 years ago in the fourth quarter of the game that just had no business making, especially as a rookie. Just no fear on a big stage. She's got such a good pro personality.
I mean, she came into the league looking. I would even argue, some might call me crazy, that she should have won Rookie of the Year that season. I mean,
who was in that draft?
I think it.
Oh, was that Asia Wilson?
Yeah. I mean, so obviously fine, whatever. But you redraft that, and there's no way in hell you guys are getting her.
No, that's probably right.
Okay, so it's like you're going just with a high ball screen action, a really high ball screen action.
I'm surprised to see how much we have Elena just kind of spacing here. This is I think this was a few games into Christy Tolliver being out, so we were probably still trying to figure out all of our big lineup options. We weren't the finished product this way. Trying to see if they're switching or not. That's pretty good D by Minnesota.
So 3-point lead, minute and a half to go. Looks like they're taking a timeout. What are you guys talking about in the huddle?
Good question. We are. I'm gonna guess we're gonna still talk about, if it goes into still, who do we want to leave? Who do we want to stay home with? We're probably, I'm probably trying to take a look down. Marianne Stanley and I are probably trying to look down to see who they have in the game, whether they've subbed like Lexi Brown in for Danielle Robinson or something like that. Because if certain players are in the game, we may designate somebody to double. We're probably trying to be careful about leaving Dantas again if it goes in, to not give up that 3 at the top of the floor. Probably talking about what we want to switch and what we don't want to switch. And then Coach T's usually got a play drawn up here for our next offensive possession, just so we don't have to use a timeout if we don't want to.
That's actually a really interesting point. You often, when watching from TV, you see the head coach sit down in the huddle with everyone talking it over. I've always been curious what the assistant coaches are doing during that time period.
Yeah, probably just trying to make sure we have our matchups. The last thing you want is to come out of the huddle and all of a sudden you're trying to scramble to figure out matchups, and then everybody forgets what you talked about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This guy's intense, man.
Yeah, that fan looks like he's ready to throw down.
I like it.
D-Rob's still in the game. You can see Ariel Atkins back in front of the post already, just in case they try to go direct. There she is right there in her lap. And strips it.
Oh, boom.
About doubling that if it went into her.
Yeah, can we run that one back?
Sure.
So, like, even as soon as the ref hands the ball to D-Rob, she's going to back way up. We know Minnesota likes to try to go to direct to Sill late game sometimes, like Phoenix does with Griner. So she's in her lap. As soon as she catches it, she's already there.
It's great defense.
Latoya does a great job being straight up.
That's nasty.
Yeah, she's got a knack for those plays. She stripped one from Cambage in Dallas 2 years ago like that to seal a game.
Oh, that's so frustrating as a post player, too. It's like you're just swarmed.
I don't know if we're in the bonus here, but I definitely don't think they were trying to foul. Looks like bonus, man. That's a big play.
Wow.
Well, and that's another thing. I mean, as coaches and players on the court talking about fouls and are you trying to foul? Are you not trying to foul? Clearly they weren't there in that situation, but that's a huge play down the stretch that obviously Cheryl Reeves very frustrated with the ball, but to put her on the line and give her 2, that's tough for Minnesota.
Yeah, Cheryl wasn't too happy with that one. I think probably rightly so. There didn't appear to be a lot of contact.
Dantas gets up another 3.
That's pretty good D, though. I think we'll live at that one, especially on the wing. She's a little. My guess is the numbers say she's a little bit better at the top of the floor. Elaine did a good job containing Sims too.
And now, under a minute to go, it's so much about time and score and possessions. Two possession game, under a minute, clock's on your side. I mean, you guys are obviously professionals. They're trained at this.
That's a great pass.
Wow.
This was right when Emma really started getting her rhythm down the stretch of the season. But I think that was something we got smarter about. Elena, late game, brings the ball up, and instead of having to try to work to get it back to her to get a touch, she just keeps it. She's comfortable enough with her ball handling. They try to run off the backside. Tosh makes a nice cut to put Sims in a tough spot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can't have Sims pinned between Cloud and Mies. Like,
no, if Tosh stays in the corner, she probably just rotates up. But because Tosh cuts the rim, she has to go with her.
And that right there is the dagger. I mean, I know there's
a big shot,
but that one hurts. Minnesota's got to go quick here, right?
Yeah, I think they probably don't care 2 or 3 right here. See if they can go. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to go direct again or get something for Odyssey quick at the top of the floor. They like running some of the same action we do of Odyssey curling towards the ball. Odyssey's going to take it out, though, so probably not that. Right back to her. Oh, that's out of our old playbook.
And that's a nice little play. A little clear out for Sill. I mean, that's a quick attack to the basket, gets herself to the free throw line.
I'll have to ask Cheryl. That was right out of the Taj McWilliams Franklin playbook back in the day.
Oh, there you
Both
go.
in Connecticut and then Cheryl had her in Minnesota. So I'm sure it had some origins in there somewhere.
good old Mama Taj.
Taj, probably the smartest late game player we've ever had.
She really does not get the credit that she deserves as far as like the legendary players of the league, in my opinion at least.
No, one of those unheralded ones for sure. Small college, all that. I don't want to jinx her what already happened here, but late game free throws for us. Clutch all year.
There you go.
I mean, you have this one player who just never seems to miss free throws, like ever.
That's a big shot by
Yeah, so we had a little breakdown there. We're switching, and I know Emma's worried about Ariel Atkins getting posted up.
Okay, so
But late game with a 7-point lead, we can't run in off a shooter like that. I think we try to come from the weak side to get Ariel out of there. But we should just let her, even if Silk catches it, just don't foul her, don't give up an and one.
tough pass there by Sims over Deladon too.
Yeah, almost didn't get there.
Big shot.
Nafis is so good.
She's a really good player, man.
And people don't think of her with the scoring ability that she has, which boggles my mind.
I'll tell you that cross-court pass right there didn't look too great from the opposite bench, but it got there. I think we all just kind of looked at each other after that one.
That's a risky one with that angle.
Yeah, a little bit. Maybe just shoot the free throws, Toya.
4-point game, 18 seconds left.
Yeah, just get fouled.
How much do you guys practice end of game situations? I mean, I know you didn't have a ton of them in the regular season, but through the course of whether it's training camp or just practices, is that something you guys spend time on? You know, put 20 seconds on the clock, you're up 3. Do you guys spend a lot of time doing that?
A ton. And I think, one thing that gets overlooked sometimes is making sure everybody knows the rules. There's so many late game rules that, whether it's fouls to give or advancing the ball, you got to make sure everybody knows that stuff to start with.
For sure.
Because you can lose a game by, dribbling when you should have taken the timeout. Now you can't advance it. Oh, geez, we're fouling. And then when we had that 9-day gap between regular season and the playoffs, we kind of put in some new late game stuff, knowing that we were probably going to be in some closer games. So that was a helpful time to get some of that back fresh in our minds.
Yeah, especially because you can practice it all you want, but if you haven't seen it all season for the most part, it must be hard to kind of click that on the player's mind.
It was. I think there was a little bit of not a concern, but just kind of in the back of our minds. But the one positive thing is we had been in a lot of close games the year before, and we'd won some close games. So I think we were all just hoping we had that muscle memory in us.
And this one is about it. We're probably just shooting free throws to this point. And we all know Elena doesn't miss very often.
No, that's the best feeling in the world with the lead Elena at the line.
And the mask. I mean, can you get better?
And the mask.
And the form, man.
I can't wait for the day where her mask that she wore at like one of the finals games goes for like 100,000 on eBay.
Smithsonian, can we get it right over the Smithsonian down here?
There we go. There has to be a connection.
Man, all right. Speaking of, I saw on, I don't know if it was eBay or somewhere it was being sold. I know we're talking about Michael Jordan and everything with the documentary, but I heard that his very first game ticket was on sale for $25,000. Did you guys hear that?
Wow.
That's crazy. Like a copy or the original the first game he ever played in the NBA. Anyway, just made me think of that. Great stuff.
I believe Mike Thibault would have been in attendance probably.
There you go.
There you go.
Maybe he still got a ticket. Maybe one of you guys have a ticket.
Maybe they're the ones who sold it. Who knows?
There you go. Coach, that's great. I mean, it was difficult for us to find end of game situations that weren't necessarily in the playoffs. So just interesting to go through and hear your analysis of it. And I have a few questions myself just about this team. I mean, you guys obviously have something special. I have one of the most potent offenses, we've ever seen in the WNBA. How do you keep this momentum going?
Yeah, we have players that feel right now like that it's time to strike while the iron's hot. Like we have a group that is just really hungry. We have players, almost immediately after the championship talking about this is a team that can stay at the top. I'm sure every team that wins a championship feels like that. But then we have obviously added a couple pieces. Tina Charles and Leilani Mitchell gives us something a little different, gives us some fresh blood, which I think you need if you're trying to do it again. But no, I think it's just a hungry group that they tasted that little bit of success and they want to keep having it.
I want to get back to Tina here in a minute because obviously I can't just ignore that giant elephant in the room. That's awesome, by the way. But what does this team, it's hard to go through and really find some weaknesses, but what does this team have to get better at headed into this season?
I think we feel we can get better defensively without necessarily, we're not going to change. We're not suddenly going to add a 6'8" post player that's good enough to play. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's only a handful of those that are really good enough to play at both ends of the floor. We felt Tina helped address one of our biggest needs, which was rebounding, especially defensive rebounding. We felt like if we could finish some more possessions with a board, our defense would get better as a result. So I would say that was probably one of our biggest needs. And then just getting everybody a little bit more, being a little bit more specific with our coverages, with our terminology defensively. That's kind of what we're spending some of this time right now, looking at hopefully getting everybody on the same page before we get back together.
Just real quick, and then I know Aryeh's got some questions. Talk about Tina joining the team. I mean, you've already got so much firepower, especially, with that stretch 4 position with Misaman and Deladon. Now you add one of the greatest centers in the league in Tina Charles. How does that dynamic look with the three of them?
I think everybody's now been in a position where we've played so many different lineup combinations. We've played big, we've played small. Tina in her career has played 4, she's played 5. So I think maybe just everybody's at a point where they don't mind having to be a little bit flexible. We had tried a bigger lineup early in Tina's career in Connecticut with mixed results, kind of like when we first tried it here, but I think we're a lot farther down that road. Tina's going to get a chance to play with a lot of shooting around her. Hopefully when she posts up, she won't see the double teams that she's seen at different times in her career. And then everybody's going to be able to take the load off each other in terms of minutes, touches, having to play defensive matchups. Tina can play with Elena and Emma. She can play with LaToya, and that changes things. So I think just flexibility. They're all insurance for each other in a way. So I think just, right now we're just trying to get her familiar with everybody, just feeling connected. And then hopefully when we step on the court, we can just get right to it.
All right, I got some tough questions for you, Coach.
Okay.
What was your most memorable moment as a coach, and no copping out and saying winning the championship this past year?
Oof, good question. Getting to the finals last year at the time was big. We just had that great run after the All-Star break, kind of broke through. Obviously, we struggled in the finals, but I think that just flicked the switch. And in terms of our collective confidence, I'm trying to think if there's like a specific moment for me in there, but winning that Game 5 in Atlanta was such a release. It just felt like we took the next step.
And what's it like coaching in the W? Like, what are the keys to being a great assistant in the W?
Well, one is, I would say, knowing the league. Because it is a smaller league, you can really get to know every team. You're going to play everybody now with the balanced schedule multiple times. Just trying to anticipate other coaches' tendencies, other players' tendencies, and then really figuring out what on your roster is going to work in that way. I think other people have said it, but it's so competitive. Even teams that have losing records or whatever, you're sweating out every game against them. And we're playing Indiana this year and needing almost a miracle to win that game. So I think just trying to figure out what are those little tiny things that are going to separate you over the course of the season.
Talking about your role as a coach in the league, how has it changed over the years? You went from an assistant coach to assistant head coach, and what is that? What are the differences? What has happened to your position? What's changed?
I don't know if there's too much a big of a difference in terms of the title, but I think as we've gone along in these 7 years, we've actually added some staff. We've brought in some new people on board. So probably part of my role now is helping those people find their role within the staff a little bit, figure out how we can all support each other. I think I've been able to take maybe some of that delegation, big picture stuff off of Coach T's plate. And not just me, but Maria Giovanetti, our assistant GM, has kind of followed the same track as I have in that regard. Now we have somebody like Asia Jones on staff who needed to learn. Her experience is unbelievable, but she just needed to learn some of the technical coaching pieces of it. So I think that's part of my role now. And maybe it wasn't originally. Originally, I was just trying to figure my own stuff out and see if the players believed anything I was saying.
So talk to me a little bit about – oh, sorry, Rachel got some.
Okay, I just want to ask one more and then I'm done, I promise. everyone talks about your name for all these head coaching positions, and you know, I would be far-fetched to not just go ahead and ask you, you know, you've been able to accomplish a lot in your young career. What aspirations do you have for your own career? Like you've been at the collegiate level, you've seen the professional level, you've seen NBA. I mean, you've been around so much. What type of aspirations do you have?
I'd like to be a head coach at some point. I think we are, you know, I don't think I'm talking out of class here. Coach T has talked about there's a little bit of a plan in place in DC for that maybe to happen at some point. I honestly, I try not to look too big picture, like too far down the road, because you never know what opportunities are going to come up or what's going to happen. This league is crazy. You never know how things can change in a year or two. I have felt the last couple of years like I just you know, there's been different opportunities and stuff, but our current group has been such like a joy to be around day to day. I didn't want to leave, especially as we were kind of making our ascent these last couple of years. I didn't want to leave being a part of that. So like whatever career ambitions I had, I kind of try to put where I'm at in that moment above any of that other stuff.
You're talking about your dad a little bit. I'm curious, how does your coaching style differ from him? What are some things that you're a little bit more focused on than he is? Not throwing shade or anything, but I'm curious about, you know, separating the T's.
It's a good question.
I'm probably like the least qualified person to answer that. I think that because I think we're different in a lot of, even though we see a lot of things similar, I feel like we have some differences in personality. But I think if you ask other people on our staff, they probably say we're really similar. I don't know. I kind of view it as like trying to fill in the gaps, like where I think that maybe I know stuff he doesn't want to have to deal with. You know, he's not going to sit down and worry about dividing up the scouting schedule, who's going to take what. So I'm like, all right, well, I can do that. But he's so inclusive of not just me, but of everybody on his, like, you better have thought about it. You better have an opinion when we have a staff meeting. Like, he might just ask you straight out. So it's not like any one person feels the burden of doing all that stuff. He's so good at making everybody feel a part of it. And I think his players feel the same way.
Yeah, that's great. We appreciate the insight, a little peek into the mind of Eric. Much appreciated. Thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thanks, guys. And shout out to everything you guys are doing. I'm now a subscriber following Cheryl Reeves' lead. So let's pass that along. I'm just very glad that you weren't also talking about Eric and Hamby making the corner three in front of our bench to send that series. I was just watching the first episode like, oh, God, I don't need to watch any more of her making last-second shots.
Yeah, we tried to stay. I mean, you know, we try to make it friendly for you. I
Appreciate that.
We almost had to pick a game where you guys lost because it was the closest game you had all season, and we were like, no, we don't want to do that to him.
That's all right. It would have been good for me.
Well, thank you so much, Coach, and best luck and stay healthy.
All right, guys. Take care. Thanks.